to Improvisationally Speaking.
Thank you, Julian.
This is the first episode that I have ever done, that we have ever had, that is actually you are physically here.
I'm very excited.
I am too. This will be really cool. We'll see how this turns out.
Yeah.
So, Shian, I know you from the Association of Training and Development, Puget Sound chapter, where you and I went to a function last month, where you work in a professional development role with what's called the ATD, and you are a member of both the national ATD and the local ATD Puget Sound, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Got it. Okay. And I came and was asked to do a small portion of kind of a warm up using improvisation through Improv Alive. And so I got to meet you, and the reason that I really wanted to have you on the podcast was I thought that your answers to a lot of the questions that we were working on, just in the way of how professionals, how leaders develop, how we should be working to develop leaders in this industry, how you spoke about it was eloquent and interesting to me. And so I thought, what a cool way. And there were links into the work that I do in in thinking and behaving and reacting using the value of your subconscious, or not planning your response, and not planning so much, but allowing things to let be and working with your energy.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, and it really does tie into my work and to this podcast.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to start out by asking you, I don't know, from what I did of my research, I don't know where your beginnings were. Where were you born, and where did you grow up, and what brought you to doing, working with people to be leaders?
Well, I started off in California, so I was born and raised in Los Angeles. But in that time, I've worked in nonprofit and human rights administration. I worked in corporate sales and marketing, and then I transitioned into training, organizational development, and leadership development. But what brought me to it was an evolution of, at first, just really caring to serve as some sort of bridge and connector between people of different cultures globally, and to see how we can help them to create new ways for society to be more sustainable, to develop new solutions for people to work together through business, commerce, and government. So actually, initially, my career started out in the public sector, in public administration, in human rights administration. But, later on, I wanted to really be focusing on the solution side, to work in a business, because I like that interaction. I like building new solutions, new products, services, and expanding the marketplace. And so that was much more focused on, helping different managers reach their sales targets. How can I help the brand for the company? How can I help with outreach efforts? How would that differ from region to region, country to country? And so that was very external focus in terms of how can you help individuals and companies thrive to their best capacity and be represented in the way that they wanted to be, to attract their audience and marketplace. And then, I transitioned to really think there were sales managers that really did well. Others were going through some transition. Others had maybe cultural questions around how they fit with the organization. So I really wanted to understand people's psychology more, which I've always had an inherent internal interest in, understanding what makes you tick, what challenges you. Why is it that under the leadership one person might thrive, the other person might decide this is not for me, I've got to go? Why is it that one person will say, I can wait out, I've been in this career for many years and I can wait through this transition, this change, I'm not bothered by it. Whereas another person will say, no, I'm not dealing with this. This is too much for me, or this is not aligned with the kind of workplace or environment that I want to work in. And so wanting to understand human psychology and behavior a lot more, I wanted to be part of that solution. How can you help people reconnect to the greatest source of motivation of their drivers? How can you help them get through challenges, or know what kind of environment or team would they best be suited for or working in? How can I be that pivotal piece or that source to help people be their best, to identify what that means, how they do it, and what that looks like in a business setting in terms of KPIs or metrics and their job. And so it's through that interest that's focused originally on humanity, on helping society, that focus more on the human drivers and what that means within a company organization.
How did you get involved in working with cross-culturally? I mean, I know are you Chinese?
Yeah, ethnically I'm Chinese.
Right. And how did you get comfortable? I mean, you were born in LA.
Yeah.
And
right.
you've lived in LA and Seattle. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you've lived overseas as
Right.
well. But how did you start? What was that spark for you that got you interested in that?
That's a really good question. So at a really young age, even growing up in LA in high school, my friends were very diverse. I just had an interest for having cultural diversity. My best friends, even I remember prom was like Mexican, Catholic, there was Israeli Jewish, African American, American born Thai, myself. We were just all really mixed. And going to school, I studied international relations, and I always appreciate different cultures, but I've always had a desire to experience more beyond what I know. And so even in school, I decided to study abroad for 6 months in China because I felt like my life is not limited just by what I experienced here in LA or even in San Diego where I went to school. And so after graduation, I thought I want to either move to Shanghai, New York, or London. And luckily, my first opportunity took place in New York, and I hopped on a plane. I had everything I owned in 2 suitcases, a backpack. I remember I was in that taxi with all of my belongings in the back. And I just felt so free and liberated. So I think the interest comes from a place of wanting to understand more about my heritage, but also a desire to explore what's available in the global marketplace, internationally, abroad, and to be able to understand more about people, cultures, and to connect them and help us all feel like we can thrive in the ways that we're born to.
So when you moved to New York, was that your first move away from home?
Yeah, in terms of out of the state.
In terms of out of state. You had been to school.
I went to school in San Diego. I studied in China for a while, and after that,
then you were free. And
I just thought, wow, there's so many opportunities I really want to explore. And not to mention, you hear about at that time China newspapers in terms of the economy booming. There's so many opportunities. It's very kind of raw, and I just wanted to see what it was about. So I thought I had nothing to lose at that time, but just so much to gain and learn.
And what were you doing in New York?
Well, New York was when I was working at a nonprofit focused on human rights administration. It was at NYU School of Law.
That's right, okay.
Yeah, so the organization brought in people in the legal field, from prosecutors to lawyers to judges, professors from abroad, specifically focused on Asia, to learn more about due process, the judicial system in the U.S., and see how they can implement it in their teachings or in their system.
Got it. And then you moved into, and fast forward a number of years, you are now mentoring or coaching leaders in business.
Yeah.
And you're not old enough to be have that firsthand experience at their level. I'm just guessing now. I'm throwing it out there, and you may not. Do you ever feel in your practice that that you feel unqualified at all? I mean, I'm just projecting myself.
Right.
Doing improv
Yeah.
for businesses. Sometimes I get in there, I'm like, holy cow,
Yeah.
I don't have this background, but I'm doing it, and they're trusting me.
I feel like I'm definitely very humbled by the very intelligent group of people and clients that I work with, and well-known organizations. But even if you just take my situation into consideration or anybody else's, I think it's very easy, regardless of your race or your age or even position. My clients say, who am I? This person has been in this organization for 15, 20 years. I just started. I don't know enough about this organization. Or others, people say maybe they're more senior, or they've been in this industry for longer, or maybe they're, moving into a new role and learning so much. So I think it's really easy for people to really sometimes question, to say, am I the expert? And the answer is, I wouldn't want to say I'm an expert in any way, but what I do is I show up, and I show up very authentically, and I know my craft well, and I can do it confidently and know the value that I bring. And I think that's something really important for each of us professionally, because whoever we work with, there's going to always be someone who might have had more experience in one area or another, but our roles is to facilitate their development, not to replace what they do, not to be them. We each are unique. And so for me, as long as I can facilitate their growth or help them in their path, and through my trade of doing this on a much more frequent basis than them, I just kind of hold on to helping them find more solutions and have more clarity for their situation.
How do you show up authentically? I mean, sometimes you're facing someone who that their world is not one that you wouldn't even say that you're a professional, like you are at a professional knowledge level in some of the industries and businesses that some of your clients probably are working in. How do you stay present and authentic in light of the fact that, do you ever worry about like, gosh, I hope they don't like ask me a question that I just don't know anything about? And if you're thinking about that, how can you be focused on them? How do you stay authentic?
So I'm hearing two things. One is authentic, which is maybe how do you be yourself? And then maybe how do you counter doubts when you might wonder, do I have the knowledge base for the clients? What if I don't have what they need? First, in terms of how I show up authentically, I'm just human like everybody else. So I still have to go through a process. If there's an area that I'm unfamiliar with, or I feel like there's an area that I can improve or work on, I definitely have those efforts to do my reading or to do my research. But in my role, it's actually not about being an expert in a particular knowledge base, but it's about reading people, helping them navigate through difficult decisions. It's about helping them overcome challenges and to highlight new opportunities. And so because I work with people in different positions, whether they're a researcher or they're an AI or they're a product manager or program manager, or they're in finance or legal, I will never expect myself to be an expert in all these areas across every role that they're in across various organizations. Mm-hmm. But what I can focus on is to understand kind of techniques through questioning and being able to connect and rapport building to understand what are some underlying triggers or challenges that the person might be articulating or maybe they're not conscious of. What are areas I can highlight for them to explore that they're not looking at? Are there patterns of their behavior that maybe are creating a certain outlook or a result that's different from what they want? What is it that they're really looking from me? Some are looking for a big kick in the butt to get them moving. Others are looking for a space to brainstorm, and others are looking for help with, a strategy session. So my role is to really almost be like a chameleon to understand and sense the kind of essence and energy that they bring to the table, their background, their situation. And I don't have to memorize word for word every single thing that's happening. It's not about the data as much as what they want, their inherent drivers, and understanding the nuances of what's stopping them from being able to achieve what they want.
Got it. And that kind of answers that second question, which is the presence. How do you remain present? When I think through being authentic, you're remaining present. Like you say, it doesn't matter. It's not the data that matters. It's the process, and it's the listening to what's the problem and where's the need here that you can shine light on. Yeah. And that probably keeps you present.
Yeah, I think oftentimes it can be easy to have a discussion just on who knows what or what knowledge you know what, and it becomes who is right and who's wrong. Mm-hmm. But in these discussions, there's no right or wrong. It's about what can we create as a creative solution, creative outlet, something new that fits that person's direction, or even facilitating this for a group of people. It's not, do I know more? Do you know more? It's about how can we create a space for innovation, for creativity, for new ideas, where we can work together and be in that process together as partners.
Is it hard to get to that place with people of certain cultures and easier in other cultures? Do you need to change your process or change the way you approach someone if they are from Asia as opposed to from the US, as opposed to from Australia?
Good question. There are differences. I worked for an Australian company. I have clients who are in Colombia, in the US, internationally. And so those cultural backgrounds do come up in terms of what they are conditioned to believe, how you speak or how you behave. But ultimately, I don't let that become the driver, or I don't assume that's who they are. So we might just touch upon, okay, a client said, because I have this kind of background in my culture, very direct, we're kind of loud, we just say things as they are, but we're very verbose about it. We're very expressive. We don't hold back. And maybe sometimes that can come off a little bit strong for certain cultures who might be a little bit less direct, or a little bit, more collective driven. They're not as outright expressive. And so we talk about whether these traits are serving them in the environment that they're working in, and what part of their culture they want to bring to where they work, and what elements do they want to develop about themselves, so that they appear how they want to appear, so that they're understood for who they really are. They're not misunderstood for the way one conversation kind of went off track.
Yes.
Or a misinterpretation of you, a quick judgment, and that relationship kind of derails. So we talk about how we want to align them so that they can be their best version of themselves, and what kind of brand they want to represent.
Yeah. You mentioned there's a couple of articles that you wrote that I saw on LinkedIn. One of them was called Big Mistakes That Leaders Make. And one of the salient points that you were talking about was managing your mind and emotions versus getting more done doing faster work or longer work. Your example was the boss that you once had who said, if only my workday could be 36 hours, imagine how much I could get done. But then you think about, what would you feel like after a 36-hour workday? Is that a US problem? Is that a problem with Western culture? Is that a worldwide problem?
I think you see a lot of it in the US, you see a lot of it in Asia, and it's based on the need to be productive. How can I get more done to get the results I want? And I'm not there until I see it, until I can prove it, until I can articulate to other people. I'm not impressive unless I can state these facts, that I'm the biggest and I'm the best. And if not, then that is my next step goal, to be the biggest and the best. This is not for everybody, but I do believe that it's important for all of us to step back sometimes and ask ourselves, is this the way that we want to have things? Are we kind of running in a routine way, very automated, where we're just doing the next step, but really not being intentional and thoughtful about how we show up, or the decisions we make? So for myself, I have my own routine where I step back on a regular basis to really meditate on, do I need a break? Should I explore other options? How strong do you push, or how much do you try before you let go? Sometimes you can push so hard because you want outcomes so badly, but it can actually set you back because you come off too forceful. Mm-hmm. So how do you determine these kind of boundaries with relationships, work relationships, how far you want to push a stakeholder? A lot of this has to do with the nuances of, what can I do that feels right? I'm in my flow, but I'm productive at the same time. And that takes a lot of reflection and just regular downtime to think about your strategy, to think clearly, and to let go, and to see what other new ideas might come up.
Mm-hmm. That also really leads into another piece you wrote on mindful leadership, with a focus on the long-term goals. It was a focus on when someone is thinking about, like, checking off this done, as opposed to looking at why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And what is the underlying moral reason? Like, what's driving it? Why are you doing this, rather than what are you doing and how much of it are you doing?
Right.
That sounds like it ties in pretty close to the same.
It does. I think it's so easy for us to get executional. Think about just getting things done so that we can move along, which is great. We need that kind of progress to move forward. But I feel oftentimes not a lot of people in business or professionals can use an element of thinking, how much quality am I getting from this? So oftentimes I'll talk to my client, you have so many things to do. How do you determine your priority? Well, let's talk about what kind of impact you want to make and the quality that you want out of this experience. How can we maximize the quality and the results you get by being able to determine the input you put in? So I'm working with, for example, a senior director who is trying to improve his brand throughout the whole organization. And there's so many things you can do to increase your brand, right? You can do things online, you can increase your transparency with different organizations. How do you decide, though, the audience that you want to connect with, that you feel passionate about, how can you put in, thoughtful, quality input that gives you the maximum return? And this is not always quantitative, but sometimes qualitative. Thinking about the big picture rather than just getting things out for the sake of seeing those numbers come in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
That's totally ties in. That absolutely ties in. I also wanted to make sure that my recording is still running. Yes, we are. Just make sure I've never seen it go to a screen like that. I wanted to talk a little bit about NLP because you are a certified master coach in NLP. And for those listening, NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, and it essentially is the way that your conscious brain communicates with your unconscious brain. And I'd love to hear kind of where, why is that such a hard thing for people? Why does my brain need a translation to the other part of my brain? Why is that a problem? It shouldn't be a problem, right?
Right. I think it's because, through our blueprint conditioning, our upbringing, we are used to doing things in a certain way where eventually it becomes subconscious. We're not even aware of it. But to bring certain things to the surface level, sometimes we need a chance to disrupt it, to have awareness on, are these patterns in the way we do things, the way we drive, the way we interact with people, how our relationships are run, is it taking us to the direction that we want to go? And it oftentimes, that's why people go through training or coaching or are so invested in their personal development. You have to stop and ask these questions to say, this is what I know. This is all I've known. But until someone shows you something else, you realize maybe there are possibilities outside of my paradigm, outside of the realm that I live in. For example, when I lived abroad, the way I thought you do things was normal was very different. When I was living in China, ethnically I'm Chinese, but I'm born and raised in the US, and I thought certain things were obvious, kind of like standard, but until you live abroad or you work with other cultures, you realize these norms are not necessarily standard. And you only in time start to understand where people come from. And so it kind of derailed my understanding and my behaviors because I can no longer live by the paradigm that I lived before because it wasn't working for me. I had to be able to shift and assimilate with the new culture I was in to operate more effectively, to be able to communicate with them.
What was the evidence that it was not working for you?
In terms of expectations on what's normal in the workplace or what's not. How much of local culture is present and should stay intact, and how much of it should maybe be connected to the organization as a whole. So for an organization, how much do you localize it, but then how much of the foundation do you keep so that the organization still stays connected internationally? And you see this, this challenge with various large companies. As you grow and you become really large, you need a connecting base, right, to have certain standards of operation and the culture, but you still want to respect how people do things locally. And so being a new manager in these various regions, I had to learn how different locations operate and not to hold each place by the same standards. Knowing they have a different background, they're run on a different timeline, they have different challenges, they have different expectations. And being a leader means really taking the time to understand that and not assuming what you bring on board is how things are done. Yeah.
Interesting. It reminds me of when I work in improv, leading teams in improvisational exercises. One of the important transitions that a team can go through during the process of a workshop is being able to look at how they react to certain input from others or certain stimulus and observe how they do, and then make a conscious choice as to first realize they can make a change and then play with those changes and see what best fits that situation and what gives the outcome they're desiring in the first place.
Yeah.
It seems like it's very similar to, it's dealing with the same place in the mind, but I never thought of it as in that same exact way, but it seems like it touches the same thing. Does it seem so to you?
Yeah, I think, for all of us, we have a lot of different possibilities in terms of a shift in life. If we've been doing things for so long, at some point we're in a transition stage. We're ready to try something new, a new career, a new area, a new endeavor, maybe starting our own business, or just, shifting focus and priorities to family or other things. And so part of that process means experimenting. Before, maybe I used to put in 100% of my time in this area. Now it might be 50-50. We're constantly in flux to reevaluate what we need in our current present time. And oftentimes it's not, the first try that you get it right. It's through experimentation and being okay with that. It's not a black and white answer, where oftentimes I have clients that say, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for so long. I'm so familiar and I know I can do really well if I continue, but I'm itching to try something new. And I don't know if I can make that jump. How do I make that decision through that career risk? And it means experimenting with all the areas, the gray areas in between. Before you make that leap, what kind of things can you experiment with, or can you try out, so you don't feel like you're having to give your life away, what you knew for that jump. There are progressions to get you there.
Yeah.
And part of that is having fun, trying new things, and making that a joyful process rather than a very intense and just doing it from a scary place.
Sure. What is your largest challenge as you progress through your own professional growth? What do you find to be the things that you're working on now?
Currently, it's learning the same kind of lessons that my clients bring to the surface, which is really amazing. We help them get through amazing roadblocks or reach amazing goals. And then, as I was saying before today's interview, either before or after, the same kind of issue or challenge or situation shows up. I'll give you an example. So I was working with a woman who is based in the East Coast, and she said she's doing really, really well in her career, but it's at this point where she needs more hours in the day. She just can't take on more. It's at this point where she just needs a break. And so we had to look out at her current workflow process and how to make it more efficient. And a key piece that was driving her through her entire life, how she was as a child up to how she was as a professional, was she was such a caretaker that looked after her team. She's known to be very accountable, takes care of everything. She'll protect her team from areas that she doesn't want them to stumble upon. But because of that, she ends up taking on too much. So she might say, hey, look at my schedule, and if you can find an opening, you just book that time. And she's losing control over how she spent her time because it wasn't by how she wanted it. It's as things come on to her plate and as, demands come on, the answer was always yes. Yes, before I even hear it. I have clients like that. Before I even ask the question, it's yes. Right? As opposed to some people, their answer, no, before you even ask. And so I was learning for myself is that we always have to create a space, and we were talking about this before. How do we want to create our priorities? How can we reconstruct this so that we can be more effective during the day? So at some point, if we feel like things are a little bit out of balance, we're spending too much time on a certain thing and we're not able to fulfill our other needs, then we have to reevaluate how we do this. And it can be through organization. It's as simple as how does she get through all the emails in her day, right? To how can she reallocate the current responsibilities or the asks that are coming to our team to other resources. So that takes time to understand the organizational structure. What kind of resources do you have? Who else can help you? Oftentimes we think we're the only ones who can do it.
All right.
Right? So for me, I also have the same learning. I want to help so much so that it's easy for me just to say yes. And I will book in that time even though I may not have it, but I will make it happen for you and overstretch myself. But, just even speaking to her out of many other lessons I have with other clients, it's a reminder to say, no, we have to be able to work in our own sacred space and be able to respect the workflow that we want to create for ourselves based on the drivers that we have, the rhythm that we have. Yeah. So we don't want a rhythm to be go, 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 and it's just very automated. It's up to us to decide how that looks like and to articulate it and have the resources support us.
What legacy do you want to leave in your work, in your life work?
That's challenging to answer because I feel common to a lot of other people. Inherently, my goal is just to see individuals thrive to be their most authentic self. So whether you're a comedian or you're an AI or you're an engineer, to see that you're making decisions in your career and your life that are most authentic to you, and seeing you thrive either through your business, your as an entrepreneur, through your craft, through your personality, and to see that people are able to reach that point where they know that they've really given it their all. And whether it's through communications or helping companies with their branding or coaching or facilitating, to me it doesn't really matter. But I think there's a lot of work to do globally to really give people permission to make those difficult decisions that might not be as big of a jump as I think it might be, and to allow for more connection globally, more understanding, so that we have a chance to work with different audiences, different clientele base, to not be held back by what we think it is like to work with a certain group, because you never know till you get there. And so that's what I really appreciate most working internationally, is to be able to break these kind of barriers or stereotypes of what it's like to work with a certain group of people, to not label them even individually, to say all certain groups of people from this place is one way or another. And I find that very liberating. So in short, I don't think there's a short answer, but I'm very open to discovering how it unfolds in time.
Shian, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
Julian.
for being part of this.